So you may be wondering how this project began. Well, most of you don't know this, but I do take on a limited number of commissions, but I can't always talk about them. In this case, this client was kind enough to agree to a showcase of this project and even participated. So let's get started. Easy Street Rick is a fellow YouTuber in my area, and he's an avid Wolverine fan. So we'll be making him a set of custom Wolverine claws. He's already gone ahead and chosen a file that he wants to use, but needs it to be made from a more durable material along with some minor modifications. I'm going to put a link in the description below to the original creator files on Thingiverse. Now for this final model, we needed to both combine the new meshes together and add a small hole so that he could sew these to the handle. For him, he found that the provided handle grip to be cumbersome, so he'll be replacing that with some foam to make it more comfortable. I had two options for combining the meshes together. The first was to combine them as is, which requires a lot of merging and limits my ability to make changes later. The second option was to simplify and remodeled the design so that I could make changes as I went, and was the option I decided to go with. This allowed me to do a couple things to make the printing a little easier to achieve. I added a small platform that would be flat when printed, but could also be sanded down afterwards. Although this was a small change, it made a big difference when printing in an upward direction. With the final design approved, I could then begin my first test prints, and it completed without any issues. This file just barely fit into my printer, so I had to be very careful when removing the build platform so that I didn't accidentally puncture the FEP sheet. The nice thing about this, however, is that I could print the model in one single piece, which required minimal post-processing later. Before I began sanding, I first wanted to make sure that I had the correct spray paint for the job. Since durability was the main focal point, I went to the local automotive department and bought some car touch-up paints for this. As always, I couldn't resist getting some extra paints in the process. With the color chosen, I could then begin the long process of sanding down the parts. After a couple of hours of sanding and cleaning, I was finally able to begin the painting process. I first began with a base coat of primer, and this is essential to prevent the paint from peeling. Once that was completed, I then began adding the main color for the claws. Now you might think it was as simple as simply painting just a one color, but you would be mistaken in this case. If you use only the one color without any detailing, you often end up with something that looks quite bland and fake. For this reason, I began experimenting on a test piece with the final finish I wanted to achieve. In the end, I used a very thick paste which I could dry brush on slowly, and this allowed me to get this more metal-like texture and shading that you see here. Although the camera doesn't pick up the differences nearly as well as it should, it really does make it look more like actual metal. To ensure that the finish would last longer, I used a UV coated finish that would help maintain the color over time. So what did the customer think about the final piece? Well, let's go and find out, shall we? Meeting up at one of the local malls, I was finally able to give him his new prized possession. Even after a full 2 weeks of drying, the piece still smelled like varnish, but he didn't seem to mind at all.
Hello.
I have your magic box.
Yay, magic box. Oh, oh my god. Let's take an appreciation of the paints. Oh my god, I love the detailing. The problem with steel ones is going to conventions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You have to, they could be labeled as a weapon, so I might not be allowed to use it to bring around. But these are not made of metal, these aren't sharp, these are not dangerous to anybody, so it is worth every penny to get this amazing print done. Once again, thank you very much. These are awesome.
No problem. I've started creating downloadable support files and mods for the machines I've reviewed, so if you're looking for some additional information, I would suggest you follow the link in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Thank you and take care.